Want legendary service from a financial institution you can trust? Whitney Bank has you covered with nearly 200 locations across the Gulf South. So stop by today. Learn more at HancockWhitney.com. Member FDIC.
Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker. Established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys and offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by Business First Bank, with locations throughout the state, including 11 offices in the Baton Rouge area, providing personal and commercial banking, treasury management, and wealth solution services to help clients succeed. Business First Bank. Banking with greater momentum. At b1bank.com.
From Mansurs on the Boulevard, we're out to lunch with Stephanie Regal. Stephanie Regal is a broadcaster and editor of Baton Rouge Business Report. It's business Baton Rouge style.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Regal. Welcome to Out to Lunch. Whether you're starting a business or growing a business, one of the biggest challenges you face is access to capital. Where do you find investors? How do you get a loan? It's a problem that is not at all unique to Baton Rouge, but in a mid-sized city like this one, it can be particularly challenging for entrepreneurs and business owners. We hear a lot about it on this show. My first guest today is in the business of helping find solutions to the access to capital dilemma. He owns Cardinal Capital, a commercial loan and equity brokerage house. It's a relatively new venture for Rob Powell, who has more than 2 decades experience with some successful companies, including Grand Casinos and Rainforest Cafe, both of which he helped take public in the 1990s. Rob has extensive experience in marketing and branding, and his career has taken him around the world. Now he's back in his hometown of Baton Rouge, helping connect business ventures to sources of capital across the country. Rob, welcome to Out to Lunch.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. Well, when Rob is helping clients identify sources of financing, among the places he looks is the bank. My next guest today is the bank. Jude Melville, President and CEO of Business First Bank, which is a rapidly growing full-service bank with a particular emphasis, as its name suggests, on being a commercial lending institution with a focus on business clientele. Last year, Business First completed a merger with American Gateway Bank here in Baton Rouge, giving the new Business First Bank assets of more than $1.1 billion and 16 branches around the state. Jude has been at the helm for the past several years and oversaw the merger, which was really more of an acquisition. Jude, welcome to Out to Lunch.
Thank you. I appreciate being here and appreciate y'all doing the show.
Rob, I'm going to start with you and find out about what Cardinal Capital does. But first, you got in on the ground floor with 2 really well-known companies and ended up taking them public. Grand Casino, which was bought by Harris and is now part of Caesars, right? And Rainforest Cafe. What did you do with these companies? What was your role in them?
Well, I was, I was in on the ground floor, correct, but I was part of the team that took them public. It was not one individual. There's a whole group of us. I was brought in under a marketing role, and at the time when you were moving that fast, you wear many hats.
Okay.
Largely, my background was in analytics. My graduate work was in analytics, and I came in and I would measure literally everything. At the time, I had the ability to measure image, and we could quantify that, and then we could add value to the overall brand and help it grow. So we did that. Then I moved all the way up into the director and vice president at the corporate level, so where I handled, you name it.
And then and you did that with both of these companies.
Correct.
And then went on and founded another firm that you were with for several years.
Correct. PCI was my own company. There's no brand equity in the name at all, but we wound up working with foreign governments, the Philippines, Central America as well, Panama, Central America, helping them develop economic free zones, trade zones, and we would use casinos and entertainment venues as an engine to start to get capital moving within those regions. So,
Family Matters brought you back to Baton Rouge 3 years ago. What is it like to be back in a market this size after doing all that exciting stuff all over the world with big public companies?
Well, I'm the eternal optimist. I think Baton Rouge has got a lot of opportunity here. I came back, and that's the first thing that slapped me in the head was, wow, there's so much to do here, so much growth opportunity here, so many fantastic people. They are just missing one critical component, which is capital. And there's capital sitting on the sidelines throughout the country. it somehow has not found its way here to Baton Rouge. So that's why we formed Cardinal Capital.
And so tell us what Cardinal Capital does. You're
Well,
not
we-
a private equity firm or a
Nope.
VC firm. You're a
Nope,
broker.
nope. Correct. We broker funds, and as you alluded to, this is relatively new for me. I have not been on the capital side. I've always been a marketing guy, but we would use capital. Now, what we'll do is we'll talk to clients. They will come to us, or even banks will come to us and say, hey, we have clients that need some help. They need capital. For one reason or another, they won't fit within a bank model, so they come to us. Banks retain most of their relationships. They retain the merchant services, what have you, and then we'll go find capital other places.
How does Cardinal Capital make money?
What we do is we'll take an upfront fee to help package whatever the company is, and then we'll take points on the back end. So we do have a success fee. The front fee is more of a fee to cover our time, where we can go through the finances of the company. We learn more about their pros and cons, their challenges, their pain points, and we come back we'll put all that in a nice little package and market it to the lending institutions. We speak banker, if you will. And I have two wonderful partners that have decades of experience in this, and they speak the language. I almost need subtitles sometimes when I talk to them to understand what they're talking about, but they do it wonderfully, and I help put all that together.
Jude, when guys like Rob or his partner Chris, come to y'all representing a client, does it help? I mean, what kind of relationship does your bank have, for instance, with a brokerage house like this?
Yeah, they're definitely, it's a very positive relationship. We haven't done any business with Cardinal yet, but we have other partners that we work with. And anytime you can remove some friction in the equation for a small business or an entrepreneur, either to get to know the bank in a way that they wouldn't have, or a lot of times to help us do a deal that we might not have done without some enhancement or some sharing of risk, things of that nature. I would add one thing to what Rob said about capital in the area. I do think that there is capital here. I think what's missing is that a lot of the capital that's on the side is gotten to entrepreneurs informally. So it's kind of with an angel network. These things do exist here, but there's not a lot of organizational structure to help be the intermediary between those two groups. So,
I would agree.
So folks like Rob at Cardinal are providing a valuable service, and that's something that we as a bank like to do as well. So we don't broker loans to other institutions, but we have about 750 investors in the bank, which is a little different for a community bank.
Yeah.
And a lot of those investors are folks that like to make investments in other equity ventures from time to time. So it's a good chance for us to help develop relationships that even if we as a bank, as a regulated financial institution, might not participate. There are sources of capital out there that we can help influence.
Mm-hmm. And so even though y'all have merged now with American Gateway and you're much more of a commercial bank with a presence, on street corners,
Right.
You're still really focused primarily on that business investment piece of.
Yeah, well, we're a full-service bank. We were a full-service bank before. We just didn't have as many branches. But we're a full-service bank. But we think the niche in community banking that we can provide an extra level of service to, and we think the niche that over the long run is the area of community banking that is most likely to remain relationship oriented is the business banking. And so we intend to continue that focus. And but the idea though with the merger and other efforts that are underway is we're still a bank, and that means that we need a robust balance sheet and we need robust relationships, and so how do you use the business capability as a springboard for a more complete relationship?
Now, would a relationship, for instance, for y'all, would a relationship with a firm like Cardinal Capital give your bank more confidence in the borrower potentially?
I think it's not necessarily. I mean, over time, I'm sure. If Rob and I, or Rob and our loan officers, were get to know each other, then there certainly would be potentially more confidence. Banking today is still relationship oriented, and Rob would have an interest in treating us right, so that we can do business together over a period of time. and not just on a single transaction. So that is something that takes time to develop, but certainly that's an added value.
You say that banking today is still relationship oriented, but it's not as much as it used to be in the past, is it? It doesn't seem like it is at the consumer level.
I think back to my answer for the previous question is I think in business banking the opportunity to rely upon relationships is still there. I think it's harder and harder. The consumer relationship is obviously becoming commoditized.
Right.
And so that's an area when it's just numbers. And so that's an area that's harder and harder for community banks to make a difference in. And that's why we think the business banking is still a very valuable opportunity for us long term.
Yeah, we see a lot of banks that will come to us and say, look, we've got a fantastic relationship. This guy's been a wonderful client. He either has two problems. He's hit a bad time now and he needs some help. So we'll go and find some bridge funding or what have you to help him through that. Or on the other side, he's growing too fast for the bank, and we love to see those. So
it's a good problem to have.
It's a very good problem to have. And so the banks will come to us and say, look, these guys we have a wonderful relationship with them. They've been with us forever. Can you help us? And our job, part of our mission, is to make sure that relationship is intact and stays there with the bank. We don't own anything. We're not a depository institution at all. We just broker the funds, and we want to make sure that those relationships stay strong and get stronger with that company, because we eventually want to turn them back over and say, here, go.
Yeah.
Right. You're successful. Go to a
in a perfect world, you kind of the same client you might hand off multiple times.
Exactly.
Right. So as they go through the different stages in the business cycle, they might have different needs and
or different products even.
Different products. Yep. And what I was going to say earlier is, so one thing is the comfort in the relationship between a Rob and myself. The other is what Rob alluded to, which is the structuring. So there are a lot of ways that non-banks can structure relationships in ways that banks cannot, but that structuring brings us extra confidence in our decision making.
Correct. For example, I'll give you, not to interrupt you, what happens, a case study, somebody comes in to us and they say, we need $3 million loan.
Okay.
And we'll turn around, and after reviewing and packaging, after that upfront fee to take a look at what the situation is they're dealing with, we find out that no, they actually need $1 million in credit, $1 million loan, and then maybe $1 million in equity placement. So yes, they may need $3 million, or they may need, in most cases they need more, but it is structured differently. Now we can provide that input, and then we can turn around and come to a bank and say,
so almost like a coach.
Correct.
Very interesting.
Which does help us a great deal.
Well, I would like to introduce y'all to a special guest, a young business person who is joining us. His name is Bradley Sanchez, and he is an entrepreneur whom I thought could benefit from talking to you both about how to grow his business, The Salad Shop. Bradley is a Baton Rouge native and an LSU graduate who went off to work for a Broadway production company in New York City before returning to his hometown to work in marketing with Pinnacle Entertainment. In 2013, he opened The Salad Shop on Perkins Road, and then last September he opened a second location on Coursey. So Bradley, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Steph.
And first things first, real quick, why does a guy who's worked on Broadway and all the glitz and glamour of the casino industry walk away from it all to open a salad shop?
That's funny.
And a very good one, by the way.
Thank you. It's funny, I'll never forget one of my college mentors. He always told me careers aren't linear when trying to figure out in college what it is exactly that I wanted to do. So I still hold on to that because it's true. My career has definitely not been linear. But, my initial thought process after graduating from college was to go and work in New York City for a Broadway theater company in marketing. And I was able to do that, and I was having a great time. Some things happened that forced me to move back to Baton Rouge, and so I stumbled upon this opportunity with Pinnacle Entertainment, which I thought would be sort of a perfect marriage between what I was doing and what I was wanting to do. And then while here, just my parents are entrepreneurs and in that business, and they are my mom is part of a franchise. She's a franchisee. And so I always had that in the back of my mind that I wanted to work for myself and build something for myself. So I found it the right opportunity to do so in 2013.
Well, you've done well enough to open a second location. Has it been difficult for you to find the capital to get started and to expand? And I know you want to grow more still. So
yeah, I would say it hasn't been difficult for the first two. I was fortunate enough for the initial shop that opened in 2013 on Perkins. I was fortunate that my parents were able to self-fund it. And then for the second shop that we opened 6 months ago, we did take out a small line of credit, but funded most of it through the revenue that we were able to generate from the first shop. So it was a slow build into that second shop. But now we're at the point where, we need to look at other options. And so,
What made you decide that it was time to open the second shop?
we just saw an opportunity for it. We were growing really fast on Perkins, and we felt that the Baton Rouge market could handle another shop. So we did our surveying and things like that, and figured out, our core demo is weekday work professionals. And so when we surveyed our second location, Coursey Boulevard, it was actually more populous than Perkins Road when it came to that demographic. So we were super excited about that, and we thought it was the right time to make a move.
What are your goals?
We're still trying to figure that out. We're in the exploratory phase of not only capital and what are the next steps when it comes to that, but what it is that we want to do with the salad shop. How it is that we want to grow. Do we want to grow slowly and privately? Do we want to grow through franchise efforts?
Is this a franchise itself?
It's not.
It's not, okay,
No,
good.
so this
Not
is
yet.
So you're not restricted to
Yeah, so
franchise.
it's completely a startup, and I was able to use my marketing background to really sort of create the concept, the model, and I was also able to use my parents' experience in the franchise business as franchisees to develop, the operational guides and things like that. It was set up to be duplicated.
So it's scalable. So you clearly have
Absolutely.
a vision
Yeah.
of something greater than 2 stores, or
Absolutely, I think so. And like I said, right now we're in the sort of sandboxing phase of figuring out how it is that
and
we
how
want
old
to
is
do
this
that.
company again?
We opened in October of 2013, so
Oh,
still
okay.
relatively new.
So Bradley, you've got president of Business First Bank here, and an expert in equity and venture capital. And what would you want to know from them? What would you like to ask them?
I would say for Rob, it's trying to figure out, we've mentioned where the capital is in Baton Rouge. And so for me, it would be, the biggest question I would have is how to tap into that and how to, explore that. That would be my biggest question.
Well,
for
we'll
you.
talk after the show. Yeah. No, it's
And what are the best ways of doing that? I know that there's several different ways of
For a
approaching.
small business.
yeah, for a small
that.
business. Again, it goes back to what do you want to accomplish?
Exactly.
And where do you want to go? So if we want to open 4, 5, 6, there's a scalable point, diminishing returns of the whole 9 yards but the model has to be built properly. And depending on how that model is built, the outcome of that will shape where we go to get the funds. Okay, because like I alluded to earlier, it could be a mix of credit, loans, equity, the whole spectrum of financing options out there. And we've got a lot of tools in our toolbox to help you get to that. The big question is, where do you want to go?
And so he needs to have his plan,
Or
his
or
goals
we can help him, shepherd him through that and steer you in the right direction. Because in my mind, and this is what I've learned in my experiences, companies, especially at the stage you're at, and I applaud you for being very deliberate about the goal setting, because most companies do not spend enough time on determining what they want to be when they grow up.
Yep.
I don't know. Maybe you would have a different.
No, I would agree. I would say it's the need to do is twofold. One is if you have the end point in mind, then you're more likely to get there, right? But the counter to that also is that it's easy for companies to make decisions that make sense in the here and now that you might have to redo or
Correct.
regret later. And so for something as seemingly basic as do you want a franchise or not, that's a decision that will affect you for 30 years potentially, right?
Absolutely.
And not every decision has that kind of impact. Most of them do not, but there are a handful of ones that do. And so the more deterministic you can be about thinking that through, I would encourage you to do that.
Yeah,
We
and-
even, a lot of people don't think of a bank as being a startup, but we just started 10 years ago. And one very small thing that we did was we began as a C Corp, and then decided that we were probably better suited. There was a little bit of a trend in community banking at the time to become an S Corp. which is it's just a way of incorporating that has an impact on your taxes. And then 6 months later, we were successful enough that we wanted to raise some more capital, and in order to do so, we were too big to be an S corp, so we had to go back to being a C corp. And there wasn't any permanent damage done, but it was a little bit confusing for investors to begin with, and it created some extra paperwork, and then suddenly you had when you're an S corp, you distribute money to pay taxes, and you don't when you're a C corp under certain circumstances. So if we had followed Rob's advice and my advice, and maybe thought through some of the structural issues early on, again, we'd probably still be in the same place, but
that's so
might have
interesting.
been
You
a
don't
little
think of
smoother,
a bank being a startup.
No, you
but
think of
it's
banks as like just existing
just
forever.
big institutions.
And that's
It's interesting
not
that y'all
really the case,
learn as you go and learn as you grow. Jude, what's the best career advice you've ever been given?
Well, it's interesting because it's almost the opposite of what I just what I just said.
We like
by
that on
accident.
this show.
So I used to be in the military. I was that's how I paid for college, and I spent a little over 5 years in the military.
Thank
and
you for your service.
I got more out of it than the country did, for sure. So it was a wonderful part of my life. But I had a chance at one point I was working at the Pentagon for a couple years, and then I had a chance to go overseas to the Middle East and be in Turkey, and this was right before September 11th happened, and then I ended up being able to serve over there for a period of time. Before I left the Pentagon, one of the colonels that I dealt with, and it's mostly colonels and generals there, so there were a bunch of them, told me just to remember that even being in the military, there are very few people whose decisions actually impact in a life or death way anything. So as you're going through and increasing in the ranks and having more management responsibilities, don't get too stuck on any individual decision, because chances are nobody's going to die because of the decision that you make. And sometimes as a young leader who is building a growing business, I fall into the trap of thinking that the issue that I'm weighing is going to be existential, and typically there's not a right or a wrong. There's a more correct or a more wrong, or a more circuitous versus straight. And so his point to me was don't get too caught up in the small details. Think big.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something that both of y'all mentioned at the beginning, and that was that we have money here in Baton Rouge, or at least it's available to entrepreneurs and business people here in Baton Rouge, but sometimes it's just knowing how to find it and the lack of organization and structure. Why do you think that is? We're not that far behind the times here, are we? And I know there have been efforts as well, and a lot of them haven't panned out. Any idea why?
Well, I don't think it's a problem just
to Baton Rouge.
Just to Baton Rouge. You know, there are places in the country and in the world that you can think of that it's an established culture, right? Where how to access capital is a known process. You know, Silicon Valley, around Boston.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are places where venture capitalists and venture firms congregate. Austin is another place that's done a good job of doing that. But there are many cities in the country that aren't Austin or Boston or Silicon Valley. So I don't think it's just a Baton Rouge thing. I think it's a matter of getting some critical mass, and I think we actually have made progress in that arena.
Have you seen a change in the past 5, 6 years?
Yeah, well, I think even the idea of talking about having venture capital funds exist here, there's more talk about it, and there are more funds than there were 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago. So yeah, I think there's definitely a little bit of traction in that arena. So I think we're making progress. I think we still have a ways to go. I think if there are any, the other thing I would say is that I think Louisiana, just in general, has some reputational issues.
You
And
think?
so it might be more about the lack of people moving here to start firms than
Yeah.
it is the lack of capital for those firms, in my opinion.
I agree, Jude. The other side of that is the way, which you're alluding to, is the way the business opportunity is packaged and the way it is presented to firms that either here in Baton Rouge or elsewhere that have the capital available and they want to invest. There are people out there that want to, but they're not going to invest in a poorly packaged or poorly presented business concept or next stage. If you're, I don't care if you're making $10 million to the bottom line or $100 million to the bottom line. If you can't present that properly to the lending institution or whoever the source of financing is in their language and what's important to them, you're not going to get it. And if you wind up sounding like, and we see this either fortunately or unfortunately, often very successful companies, but talking to the person in the language they use, it's like they're still in the garage making their ideas.
That actually was going to be my advice over here. Was I think a lot of companies make the mistake of making a good accounting officer or a good CFO their last hire when they think they're ready to go big. But really, that position is what enables you to go big. And your goal when you go talk to people, whether they be investors or banks, is to make it as easy as possible to say yes. And the only way they're going to do that is if they trust the numbers. So your big picture concept and your marketing skills, those are what make the company exist. But don't forget to, to underlay that with some financial strength and financial acumen. I don't mean access to capital, but ability to discuss numbers and ability to accurately project and ability. As a bank, it's a little different. A lot of venture firms want to know what's the upside, right? But a bank wants to know, well, what's the downside? Sure. And so the ability to project best and worst case scenarios is an important.
And show they're well thought out.
Yeah.
Is what he's also alluding to. Yeah.
That's right. So.
Jude, that's great advice. Well, y'all, unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. So,
oh, man.
I know.
Can we do it again tomorrow?
That went quick. So thank you all so much for being with us today. Jude Melville of Business First Bank, one of our sponsors here on Out to Lunch. Rob Powell, Cardinal Capital, and Bradley Sanchez of The Salad Shop. Thank you all so much for joining us. My guests on Out to Lunch today have been Rob Powell, Principal of Cardinal Capital, Jude Melville, President and CEO of Business First Bank, and Bradley Sanchez of The Salad Shop. You can find out more about Cardinal Capital, Business First Bank, and The Salad Shop by following the links on our websites, wrkf.org and itsbatonrouge.la. Today's show was recorded live over lunch at Mansurs on the Boulevard in Baton Rouge. Mansurs is open for lunch daily from 11 to 2, for dinner nightly, and for brunch on Saturdays and Sundays. The producer of our show is Grant Morris. Our technical producer is Eric Merle. Our associate producer is Peter Raschuti. And our Baton Rouge business consultants are Charlie D'Agostino and Ann Edelman. You can see photos from this show on itsbatonrouge.la and on our Facebook page. These photos are taken by Ken Stewart. Mitch Foreman wrote and performs all the music on Out to Lunch. Mitch's music, including his latest album, Puzzle, is available at mitchellforeman.com. You can get this show as a podcast, you can listen to past shows, and you can keep up with us on all kinds of social media by going to our websites, itsbatonrouge.la and wrkf.org. Out to Lunch is a production of INO Broadcasting for itsbatonrouge.la and WRKF 89.3 FM. I'm Stephanie Riegel. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to meeting you again next week around the table here at Mansurs for more business Baton Rouge style on Out to Lunch.
Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker. Established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys and offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by Business First Bank, with locations throughout the state, including 11 offices in the Baton Rouge area, providing personal and commercial banking, treasury management, and wealth solution services to help clients succeed. Business First Bank, banking with greater momentum at b1bank.com.
Want legendary service from a financial institution you can trust? Whitney Bank has you covered with nearly 200 locations across the Gulf South. So stop by today. Learn more at HancockWhitney.com. Member FDIC.